Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Monday, everybody. It's another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin. And Mike, it's a good week for Ask Mike because we've got Missouri State and Bobby Petrino coming back in town.
There's so much going on this week, and it's so much, if you get into the top 10, everything's better, fans are happy, people are not mad, so it makes your job a lot easier. So, yeah, we're on cruise control this week.
We are on cruise control this week, so let's get right into it. Our first question is from Eddie Lynn, who says, winning is great, being highly ranked is great, but with our schedule, can we sustain this with Catalan and Slusher gone, Rattler through for almost 400 yards on us?
Yeah, first of all, Slusher's coming back.
Yes.
So that's good news. Now, obviously, Catalan is gone for the season. That's terrible. How do you deal with it? Well, I think Latavius Brini is the answer. You've got a guy back there who started, I think it was 11 games. Was it 11 games?
I think so.
For A&M last year, won the national championship, and he's a starter from almost all of their seasons.
You mean Georgia, right?
Georgia.
You said A&M.
I've got A&M on the brain, and we'll get into that later on. But, yeah, it started almost all of the games for Georgia last year. They won the national championship. When you have that kind of talent, you're gonna make something happen, I believe. And I think his only issue right now is he hasn't been in our system. He hasn't played back there that much. And after the game, he gave Catalan a lot of credit. He said, when I got here, he really helped me. He said, one of the things he helped me as we got close to the season after we'd gone through August camp was he said, you're the last guy back there. You've got to be responsible for everything. There's nobody else to look around and blame. And he said, I really appreciated him saying that. So I think Brini's going to be fine. I'm not saying he's Catalan. I'm not predicting he's Catalan. We don't know, but I think he will get better and better as the season goes along because he's talented, he likes it here, and he's well coached. He's got the defensive coordinator back there working with him. So I think all that's fine. Now, as far as them giving up, almost 400 yards? I think it was 380, something like that.
Almost there.
They did, but they gave up just one touchdown. And look at the QBR rating for Spencer Rattler. It was just over 50. That's not good. So that was a little bit misleading what happened there. They had some drives that were sustained on penalties at Arkansas. It's their fault in most cases. That's one of the things Sam Pittman said. We got to cut down on these penalties. But I think when you really look at what's happening there, I understand why some people are panicking over the secondary. I think they're going to get better as the season goes along.
I think they will too. And I like what Brini said as well in the post-game press conference when he was asked, well, how do you step into a role like that? How do you replace a guy like Catalan? He's like, it's just next man up mentality. Yeah. The whole team has it. And you got to love that when you look for someone who's going to step up and lead in that position. Alabama Hogs says the Hogs are up to number 10. What would be your ranking of the Hogs?
I think 10th is a good place to be.
Okay.
I think a lot of the fans would probably say, oh, no, we need to be ahead of Kentucky. What's up with that? Maybe they'd like to be even in the top 5. Fans get ahead of themselves. But I remember what happened last year when they won the first 4, beat A&M, and then had to go to Georgia, and they were ranked number 8 in the country, and then, pow, they got hit in the mouth. So, just kind of hang back there a little bit. Don't want people to get too excited. Don't want to be too big of a target for the other teams. And then with Arkansas' schedule, if they keep winning, they will move into the top 5 pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're fixing to play A&M and Alabama back-to-back. We'll see where they are after those 2 games.
It's kind of nice, like you said, don't have too much of a target on your back. Just slowly prove people wrong, right? That's Arkansas's thing. Twinkie275 says, last football season, I made a bold prediction on Ask Mike, 11-1. Maybe I was a season early. I believe they will do it this year. With what we have seen from games 1 and 2, what's your prediction for this season? Also, any good stories with you and the Gamecocks?
I'm not good at predictions. Sometimes people have kind of pushed me into a corner and
you don't like them.
I don't like them because I'm usually really bad at it. So if you're bad at something, don't do it. So I'm certainly not going to make a prediction right now. I don't know. Last year, a lot of people were saying 9 wins, and I was going, no, and I was wrong about that. So I'm not the person to talk to when it comes to predictions. Gamecock stories, I think, didn't I tell one last week about being there?
Well, you didn't tell it on Ask Mike.
Oh, I didn't.
You told it on the Gear Up for Game Day show or Game,
Just very quickly, that was the first, in '92, that was the first SEC game for Arkansas and for South Carolina. It was at South Carolina. Station I worked for at the time, not this one, too cheap to fly me there, so I had to drive there, and it took 2 days. Drove the first day to Atlanta, then from Atlanta on the second day, got there early afternoon. And I was just shocked when I pulled up in front of their stadium, Williams-Brice, because it's like nowhere near campus. There's nothing that will remind you of a college campus. It's got like asphalt parking lots on one side, like a bunch of them, and then like a railroad yard on the other side. And their fans like to go into these old passenger cars that are parked on the railroad cars that have been sort of converted to tailgating, and they go in there and drink and have a good time, which is fine. Except I've never seen a fan base as a whole get that drunk anywhere. These people were blasted. And they immediately saw that I was not one of their local photographers that they were familiar with. They started cussing at me and yelling at me and throwing stuff at me because I'm down on the field shooting. We had 2 of us, and we did what we always do. You get one guy on one side of the 50, and that way you don't have to move around a lot. And yeah, they just were yelling at us the whole time, and I was thinking, this is one weird place. So I told that story, and a friend of mine goes, come on, you were too hard on them. Surely there are other places like LSU that are more drunk than that. And I said, well, that's just my opinion. They said, I think you were too hard. So what was funny is I'm watching the game, and they get to the end of the game, and Arkansas's got it won, and they showed this one lady. She's all dressed up in like South Carolina, and she's like up in the stands just wobbling around, and the announcer goes, I think she's had too much of a good time at this game. So, yeah, that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was actually my first college football game ever. I was at South Carolina. Whew. Yeah, isn't that weird?
And they do that stupid chicken thing over the speaker.
Yeah, they do. It's like the rooster.
Yeah, it's supposed to sound like a really scary rooster, and it's just fake nonsense.
It was
no
a weird
rooster sounds that way. They just made it up.
It was a weird environment.
It's an electronically created rooster.
I love it. Hot Dogger asked, could you explain the new block below the waist rule? I know Catalan was called for it in the first quarter against Cincinnati. How exactly does it work when the NCAA makes a new rule? Do they send an email out to all the teams when a change is made?
Yeah, they let everybody know. I don't know if they use email. They've got a way to. I think they contact both.
Do they do it at the meetings?
They can do it that way. They can do it that way, but I think they also have paper, maybe electronically submitted paper to each school. I think your head coaches would get a copy of it. Your AD would get a copy of it. Now the new rule on blocking below the waist, basically that was done for 2 reasons. First of all, they're really trying to cut down on knee injuries, and they felt like the rule would simplify. They wanted to simplify the rule. So basically, you're allowed to block below the waist linemen and stationary backs inside the tackle box, those 2 groups. But outside the tackle box, blocking is not allowed by anybody. And again, that's designed to simplify, but it's also designed to cut down on injuries, and we'll see moving forward if that has an effect.
Yeah.
But it does get anytime you have a rule change, and fans are used to one rule, and then all of a sudden it changes, and I think we'll have another question here in a minute about a rules change.
Yeah, I think so.
It confuses people. They get mad because, like, when did that happen? So, yeah, the blocking below the waist thing, there's only a couple of position groups that can do it, and then that has to be inside the tackle box, and there used to be some exceptions outside the box, and now there aren't.
Interesting. Well, Arnold Zeifel, I hope I got that correct. Arnold Zeifel?
Ziffel. That's on Green Acres.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was the name of the pig. Pig was named Arnold Ziffel.
Ziffel, I love that. He wants to know, how did Dwight McGlothern get the nickname Nudie? I've actually wanted to know this, too.
Okay, well, this is one of the great mysteries of all time. I'm not sure that we're going to find out. Nobody here knows, and everybody here has got some connections. I think what we've all said is that what we've heard so far is he just showed up and that was his nickname, and everyone just accepted, okay, you're Nudie, and nobody asked. Now, I'm sure there's somebody over there that knows. I made an official inquiry. I made an official inquiry of the football program. I sent it in writing Official inquiry. What is the origin of the nickname Nudie? And I was told, well, we're going to find out about that. We're going to find out. And then they never got back to me.
Aww.
So I'm just wondering if they don't want people to know what it means. Like maybe, I don't know. What do you think nudie means? Maybe he was walking around naked one time or something.
I know, but that just doesn't seem right. I feel like there's got to be a good origin story.
So far, it remains a mystery.
It remains a mystery. We will find out for you, though. Someone has got to ask him this year.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask him next time he's at a press conference. True Mike 22 asks, do players entering the portal after August get to save their semester or lose it?
Well, I assume you mean when you say after August, when the season starts.
When the season starts, yeah.
And no, if you try to transfer after the season starts, you cannot play for. Let's say you then transferred a few weeks later and another school accepted you. You could not play that season at that school, so you'd have to sit out that school that cycle. That'd be the fall, but also, and then you don't play in the spring, so you're sitting out that football season.
Right.
Whether or not you lose the season depends on whether or not you have a red shirt available. If you have a red shirt available, then no, you wouldn't lose the season. You just come if you were a freshman and you transferred, you'd just be a red shirt freshman the next year, and you'd still have that year back. But if you don't have a red shirt and you do under these circumstances, yes, you would lose the year. So it's not smart to do that.
No.
You better do it before the season starts.
Well, I mean, if they just don't like their situation, they may want to bounce, Mike. You never
Right.
know. Michael Ratliff wants to know if the SEC is a 9-game conference schedule with 3 permanent opponents. Who will be the 3 permanent opponents for Arkansas?
Well, of course, nobody knows who they would have to. There's going to be some negotiations, I'm pretty sure. First of all, we don't even know if there's going to be a 9-game season. But if there is, here's what I think is going to happen. This is just going by what's logical, okay? It's logical that the SEC office would go to each school and say, okay, who would you like as your permanent opponents? And you would tell them who you wanted. And they would try to accommodate you. But when you're dealing with what would then be 16 teams, there's just no way everybody's going to get what they want.
No.
So there's going to have to be some negotiation. Now, what reason would you have for wanting, say, 3 teams? Let's just take Arkansas as an example. Well, let's say Hunter Yurachek said, look, our fans want Texas every year. We got to have Texas.
Yeah.
Well, okay. They might say, the SEC office might say, okay, you can have Texas. But if we give you Texas, you're going to have to take Missouri. You don't want Missouri. All your fans are complaining about Missouri, but you may have to take Missouri. So maybe you do a compromise there and you say, okay, we'll take Missouri if we can get Texas. Then they might say, okay, we want you to take Oklahoma too, because that could be a big rivalry. We're trying to drive up attendance. And they're also trying to get with their TV package. They want the networks to be as happy as possible. They want high ratings. So I think a lot of this stuff will be done based on who your rival is. Like, you know that A&M and Texas are going to get back together every year. They'd be crazy not to do that. Probably A&M and LSU, because they've developed a rivalry. So I think they'll try to accommodate Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. I think those schools will be accommodated. But beyond that, I think geography will play in. In other words, let's make permanent opponents as close to each other as possible, so fans can travel. I think that may be a factor. But the fact of the matter is that when you start talking about this stuff, it's a little bit overrated, because if you do this 9-game schedule, you're going to have all kinds of crossover games every year.
Yeah, a lot.
A bunch. So what that basically means is you're probably, even if Texas is not one of Arkansas's permanent opponents, they'd probably play them no less than once every 3 years, and sometimes every 2 years.
Yeah,
every other year. So I don't think it's as big a deal as some fans might think, but I do think there'll be some negotiating, and I think the SEC office will try to accommodate the wishes of each school. Whether or not they can do that, I don't know.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's
everybody's money.
I don't think everybody's going to get what they want.
Yeah, I don't think so either. With Bobby Petrino coming back, do you have any good stories about how unique Petrino ran his practices? I heard there was friction between Petrino and his DC because Bobby favored the offense? That was Blood Red Hog on Hogville, by the way.
Yeah, first of all, he did let us go to practice, the whole thing. So
the whole practice?
Sometimes, yeah. Now, not every day. There were certain situations when he wouldn't. But that was a departure from what's common right now, you know, which you go in for 20 minutes and you have to leave. We had to sit in the stands, which was fine because you could see better up there. And he worked out on the stadium field most of the time. They were mostly out there inside.
Did you film it?
No.
Okay.
But you could sit up there and watch. And I've always favored that because it helps you understand what's going on out there. It's not like you just run around and, oh, I can't wait to get back to the station and tell everybody what they did in practice. We have enough brains to know you can't reveal that stuff or you won't be allowed to stay in there. So it just helped you with your personal knowledge. So I always appreciated the fact that he let us watch. Now, as opposed to what happens with the practices, there was no question. Once you sat through a few of these things, you really understood that those practices were all about the offense. He was his own offensive coordinator. He didn't give a ding-dong about defense. I think his attitude was, if our defense is bad in the game, we'll just outscore the other opponents because I'm so good with what I do, I don't worry about what those guys do. Because he had Willie Robinson in the defense. He let them do their thing over here doing their stuff. When they had to come together and do a little 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 or whatever they're doing, you better not disrupt the offense with some big sack or something like that or an interception. Those players were told, don't do too much against the offense because I've seen Petrino go off on Willie, just start yelling at him. We don't want that. Blah, 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 blah. You're supposed to be in a base defense. And Willie, he would always have this look on his face like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever been involved in.
That is incredibly stupid.
Which it is weird. But he never argued either because the guy's his boss. So I don't know. I always got the impression that when Petrino got fired and Willie left, he was glad.
Yeah, probably if you're doing that. But continuing with that Petrino theme this week, Alex Hogs 88 says it should be interesting if the student section gets a hold of a ton of neck braces like they keep talking about. This is definitely the ultimate troll job.
Well, I mean, if it happens, it'd be hilarious. There are ways.
It looks like it might be happening.
There are ways of kind of gigging an opponent, and then there are ways you don't do it. But this, to me, wouldn't cross over the line. I think it'd be funny. I think I know Petrino well enough to know what he would do. He would come out, look at it, smile and laugh and act like he thought it was funny. Inside, he'd be madder than hell. He would go inside and try to get his players before the game, you know, because you come out and see them before the game, get them all pumped up and try to use that to win the game, which I don't think is going to help him. I don't think that would make any difference. The question to me is whether or not the athletic department would try to stop it, and I don't know. Again, I contacted people over there, and they said they don't know anything about a plan by the students to wear neck braces. Now,
it's all over Twitter.
I know, and I'm thinking maybe we've got a gigantic case of looking the other way. And let's hope they do, because it would be fun to see that happen. Think about how great it'll be on TV, how visual that will be.
It's going to be awesome.
Because everybody knows, even if you weren't here, you know the Petrino thing, and you know what happened. That picture's been all over the place. So, yeah, I mean, if it happens, it's going to be funny, but we don't know whether or not they're going to pull it off or not.
We'll see. There's a lot of talk on social media, and, you know, I have to, you know, Alyssa was trying to help them out there. Alyssa was giving them tips on how to make cheap neck braces.
Yeah, because that could get expensive, right?
It can get expensive. So
you just wear like some fake turtleneck thing?
Yeah, she was saying go to Hobby Lobby and get some like styrofoam. And you can actually make a fake neck brace through styrofoam. Okay. She's very crafty, so she came up with a way for them to do it.
Hopefully it'll happen. Hey, I don't say hate for them to do all that work. And
hey, look, I mean, they could have a serious neck issue. All the students could have a serious neck issue.
That's right.
And who are they to tell them they can't come into the stadium like that?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, that's my little help for you guys there. Marty Bride's Proxy asks, would you agree that Coach Pittman is the best fit? I'm sorry, I jumped ahead on this one, but I'll go back to the other question. But would you agree that Coach Pittman is the best fit we've had here as our football coach since Coach Broyles? I'd submit his sincerity and humility are traits our Kansans really appreciate and treasure. Oh, and he's a pretty darn football coach as well.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. you know, when the problem started, and it really started when Arkansas went into the SEC, because the 60s were a fabulous year for this football program. 70s weren't bad. Arkansas was a respected national football power in those 20 years during that period. But when we got to the SEC in '92, it was a rude awakening. Things started happening, talent level dropped off. I think Arkansas had trouble recruiting for a few years because you'd always been recruiting in Texas. Now you're not in Texas, so you know you got to recruit somewhere else. You always recruit Arkansas, but you got to expand your base into the South, and it took a little while to do that. So Arkansas went backwards for a while. And even though you had some good years, Houston Nutt, you know, had 3 or 4 good years. There was no consistency there, but he'd have a good year, then maybe drop off, another good year. So you had some success. Petrino had some success. But what you didn't have was consistent success like Frank did all through the 60s, where you're up there in the top 10 almost every year.
Yeah.
And even in the 70s, you're right there hanging around, and you have some good. You didn't have drop-offs in those years where you're just worthless, like for 2 or 3 years, like we've seen over the last 20-something years. And I've always talked about that periodically when I did radio, on the air. I've talked about the fact, because people got pretty frustrated. It's like some people were saying Arkansas will never be again what it was. And I said, I disagree with that. Well, okay, how? How will this happen? And I said, it's all about the right coach at the right time. If you find the right guy, he will make it happen. I thought when Bielema was hired, he might be it, because he'd had tremendous success at Wisconsin. I thought maybe this is the guy. Turns out he wasn't. I guess the same thing could be true of Pittman. He's in his 3rd year. We don't know. But he's getting him there, and I think he's the guy that I was talking about.
Really?
Just for a lot of reasons. I think he's not just resonating here in Arkansas. He's now starting to catch on across the country. Fans of other schools, what they appreciate about this guy, we've got too many pop-offs. I'm going to talk about this later on. We got too many coaches out there popping off, running their mouths. What's that all about? You're trying to set an example, and you've got a bigger mouth than your players. This is a guy that doesn't run his mouth.
No,
he's very
never.
respectful of the opposition. He doesn't make snide remarks about other teams or other coaches. He doesn't get in arguments with other coaches. He just coaches his team, takes kind of an all shucks attitude about everything, folksy, and I think people like him. So I'm thinking, you know, he's not only going to be big here, he's going to be big across the country. And then when people find out, as he continues to have success, that he's not going to go to a place like Nebraska just because they have an opening, that he's not going to jump, that this opening, that opening, but he is here. Yeah. I think they're going to appreciate him even more. So I think maybe that particular question and the statement was there is correct. He may be the guy that becomes the next Frank Broyles. We'll see.
I think you're right on that one. I want to jump back to the other question. I'm sorry, I didn't want to skip this one, but this was a question regarding the ever-increasing number of commercials and commercial breaks in college football to create more TV revenue. It's from Alex for Hogs 88 as well. Could they not keep a permanent sponsor for each segment on the television screen at all times? The most popular sport in the world, soccer, does this during their World Cups, and there are no commercial breaks.
I think you would agree with me. Soccer is a continuous action sport.
You
don't have the number of breaks in soccer that you do in football. And that's why that is necessary. What they described is a necessary way to do that. You could not take the approach that television takes with college football and fit that into soccer. The coaches, the players would be going crazy. The people watching would be going crazy. The people at the games would be going nuts. So it won't work. What you do in college football won't work in soccer. But by the same token, you're not going to get the TV people to agree to do that. They just won't. You would take a sponsor. Can you imagine how much money you'd have to pay to be the only sponsor of a college football?
And to be on the screen the entire time.
And you have no commercial breaks, just your annoying logo is up there. I don't think that you would ever get the networks to agree to that. I don't think the sponsors would agree to it. The bottom line is, I went into this in great depth last week, this is not going to get better. You're going to have to put up with it. I like the fact that you, me, and Will have gone in on YouTube TV. We get all these cool games.
We
get a
do.
bunch of them in 4K.
We do.
I can get them at my place. You get them. He gets them. We're watching all this stuff. I'm going bonkers watching all these games.
Yeah.
I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. We remember when he and I were growing up, radio was like that. You sat and listened to your radio all day. Wow, listen to this game. Okay, I'm going to switch over to this game. We had to do radio. Now you can do that on TV. So I'm willing to put up with those long commercial breaks because you know what I do when there's a commercial break? I go to another game.
Yeah.
So-
You even said, and I didn't realize this until you told me, on YouTube TV, when you have the 4K streams, they show those shots of the stadium.
Yeah,
and
they don't have
they don't
actual
really,
commercial breaks. They
Yeah.
it just sits there and you can hear the music.
It's nice. It feels like you're
it's
at the
like
game.
you're at the game.
I love that.
So it's great.
So I guess we're keeping the 4K.
Okay, we're keeping the 4K. Will's asking if we're keeping the 4K.
Yeah, the
We're
4K is worth the extra $9 or whatever it is.
We're keeping the 4K, everyone. We're keeping the 4K. Lake City Hog on Hogville wants to know, were the officials in our game just plain atrocious or not?
You know, I think that's a little over the top. I go back and forth on officials. I mean, if you watch the show, there'll be times when I'm going nuts about them, and then other times I'm more tolerant. Those other times are when I kind of use logic instead of getting emotional. Look, here's the way I look at it when I'm thinking clearly, which is not always the case. If you look at players or you look at teams, pick a team. Let's pick Arkansas. They don't play the same every week. You have a good game, you have a not so good game, maybe a great game, then a bad game. Players don't play the same every week. Teams don't play the same. What do you think? You think umpires, referees, all those people are going to do the same thing every week?
No, they're human beings,
They're
right?
human beings. They have bad days. And they have bad days as a group. So I think that group on Saturday had a bad day. They had a lot of problems, the least of which, not the least of which was that they got the chain wrapped around or something and got
That was
when they
crazy.
stretched it and got it all screwed up, and Sam Pittman had to go raise hell with them to get it done right. So yeah, they were kind of clueless. All I will say is I've seen worse. I've
Okay.
seen a lot worse.
Yeah.
I remember the Florida game back when Ryan Mallett was the quarterback here, and they absolutely lost the game because of the officials. I remember the Auburn game, 2 years ago, when they absolutely lost the game because the officials got it wrong. So Arkansas didn't lose the game. They didn't do anything to make them lose the game. So I give them a C, not a D or an F.
Okay. A C, like C, just a C, no
Yeah,
C
just
minus,
a C.
no C
No,
plus.
not a D or an F. I've just seen so much worse than what I saw on Saturday.
Okay. Hogapalooza asks, what did you see differently in our D-line and O-line to get the ball we had on both sides of the ball, to get the push, we had on both sides of the ball? Did we have a lot of rotation on either?
Okay, I was listening to was it Stromberg that talked after the game?
No, it was Dalton Wagner.
Okay, Dalton Wagner. I was listening to him.
Yeah.
And he talked about they're going to do this every week. They're going to have some different things that they do for a specific opponent. And what they did this week was, again, I think they looked at South Carolina and the 200 yards rushing they gave up to Georgia, and they went, if Georgia can run for 200 on these guys, we can run for 300. And they pretty much did. So they made some changes. They knew they were going to have to run a lot more. When you have 65 run snaps, that's harder to make that work. So I think they made some changes, but to me the big difference was the South Carolina defensive line was not as good as Cincinnati's D-line. So you end up looking better.
Yeah, they did look better.
You've
because
got to
of that.
always take the opponent into consideration.
Yeah, they did look better because of that. Referring to helmet-to-helmet contact on KJ Jefferson that resulted in a targeting call that was reversed in the South Carolina game. Pig Feet asks, if that wasn't targeting against KJ, then what is?
Okay, this is another rules change. They remember back a couple of years ago, everybody's going bonkers because there's too many guys being suspended and there are too many targeting calls and all this. So they refined the rule. And one of the things they decided, you have to be a defenseless player. You have to be in a defenseless position. And it was, KJ was not, because he was running with the ball and he was leaning forward. That's not defenseless. You're not standing there with your arm up in the air and
No,
somebody.
he was going into contact.
Yeah, he was going into contact. So he didn't meet that definition. And the other definition is you have to be hit by the opposing player with the crown of his helmet. And when you looked at the replay, it was sort of kind of mostly the side upper part of his helmet, but it wasn't like he lowered his head and just went bash straight into him like a battering ram. It honestly could have gone either way. because it was about half on the crown and about half not. But they decided to say that they reversed it and said it was no targeting. And to be honest, watching the game, both announcers said the whole time it was not going to be targeting, and it wasn't.
Did you like KJ's comment in the post-game presser about when he got hit? He said, I didn't even know I got hit.
Didn't even know it.
He didn't even know it. I mean, that is how strong that man is.
Yeah.
I love that comment about that moment in the game. Mousetown says, I saw your Twitter comment about it being an almost perfect weekend with Texas, Texas A&M, Missouri, and Central Florida all losing. That's an odd combination. Is there anything they all have in common that made you enjoy seeing them all lose?
Yeah, they all have coaches that I don't like. How about that? Now, for different reasons. You can start with Dumbo Fisher.
I love it. Are you going to use the names you used in the tweet?
Pretty much.
Okay, great. I'm glad.
Fisher, to me, acts like he's Nick Saban. He talks like he's the guy that's won 7 or 8 national championships, and that Saban's the guy that's just won 1 at one school, when it's the other way around. He just runs his mouth too much, and he talks like a guy that's one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he's not. And plus he's at A&M, and I would automatically dislike him anyway if he was there, but there's extra reasons to dislike that. A&M's had other coaches I didn't dislike as much as him. So I didn't like the whole fight that he got in with Saban and what he said about Saban. I think you've got to give a guy a certain amount of respect when he's dominated college football the way that guy has. You haven't done it, bozo head. He has it, so keep your mouth shut. So that's why I don't like him. Sarkisian at Texas, he's like another version of Chad Morris. Chad Morris was left lane hammer down. What's it? All gas, no brakes. Yeah. That's what he says. What do they get together and come up with these little slogans? And what do those little slogans do? You know what they are? They're distractions. You throw that out there and you distract away from the fact that you're not really doing that, you know? And the other thing about any coach at Texas, and he's a good example of, they're all pretty much the same, at any given time, you're probably coaching a top 5 program in talent because that's how well they recruit every year. So you're sitting there, you've got top 5 talent, and you're not winning, but you're making excuses and throwing out little distracting things like all gas, no brakes, and all this stuff, and you got a goofy fan base that sits there and believes all that stuff and thinks, yeah, we're here, we're back. And I love the way the game went with Alabama because Alabama was playing terrible. Yeah. They looked like they were asleep. Their offense wasn't working. The receivers were dropping passes. Their offensive line wasn't blocking. You could tell Texas was just playing its tail off. Hey, we're going to beat this team. This is going to be great. And their fans are getting all excited. And they got the cowboy hats on. And we're going to be number 2 or number 1 when we win this game. And then at the last minute, Alabama just went, okay, I guess it's time to win this game. And they won it. Yeah. And now, supposedly, it's because the refs cheated and helped them. Well, there was one penalty that wasn't called that could have been, but that's true of about half the games in college football every week. So I don't like either one of those guys. Dinkiewicz at Missouri.
I love that name.
He's snarky. You're at Missouri. Why are you snarky? Why are you making snarky comments when you're the head coach at Missouri? What have you done? What have they done for you to be snarky, right?
Yeah, just get blown out, you know?
Yeah, so that's one issue. And then the other issue, he's a Gus Malzahn protege. So that brings us to Mr. Disney World coach.
Oh, UCF, yeah?
Yeah, because here's what Gus has done throughout his career. He's done this just about everywhere. He goes somewhere, he gets a bunch of stuff, gets people to agree to a bunch of stuff, and then he leaves and they're all in a mess. Now, if you go back to when he was at Springdale High School and he had the second best team in the country there, high school team in the country, had all those players, and he kept telling one of those parents that I know in particular, I'm not going to use this job to get an Arkansas job, I promise you. And then he turned around and did it. And then when he got the Arkansas job, the whole place just blew up. Half the fans wanted him to just totally be the offensive coordinator. Houston Nutt, get out of it, let him, it will be great if you do that. And the other half are, no, you're trying to take Houston's job. And they all got in a big giant fight, and they're fighting with each other, and it split everybody, split the media. All Gus had to do at any point during that was just go on television and say, people, stop this. We're not fighting. He and I are not mad at each other. I mean, a few years ago, he went on TV with Houston Nutt on XM satellite radio and said, that's all baloney. We didn't fight. So why didn't he say it at the time and calm the fan base down? I don't know why he didn't do it. But he left Arkansas, went to Tulsa, used the Tulsa job to get him the offensive coordinator job at Auburn, got that job, went back to Arkansas State, convinced them immediately to fire their AD because he was going to take over. He was going to make Arkansas State have half the state. He was going to turn Arkansas into a two-team state instead of a one-team state. It's going to be Arkansas and Arkansas State, just like Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. That's what he said he was going to do. But he said, in order to do this, I got to have a better AD. Well, the AD was a good guy. I know him. I like him. He's still around. He got him fired. And then right after they fired him, he left. So it's like, I'm going to get you fired, but whoops, Auburn wants me. I'm going. Bye. I'm gone. So then he goes to Auburn. Now it looks like a few years later he's going to be fired maybe. And so what does he do? He floats rumors that, hey, I might come back to Arkansas. You fired your coach. So a bunch of boosters get together, come up with some money. And we have an acting AD at the time, which complicates the situation. But some way, somehow, they got word back to him, hey, this is what we'll pay you, $7 million a year for 7 years, $49 million contract. And woo, by some strange coincidence, that's what he got offered at Auburn. I think his agent, Jimmy Sexton, went, hey, Arkansas has offered this. What'll you do? And Auburn said, we'll give you that. And he got it. And then guess who Arkansas got? Chad Morris. And Malzahn, by the way, recommended Chad Morris because they were friends. Yeah. So come on, all of that, that's why. And Dinkiewicz's association with him does not help him in my mind, but it's still, Dinkiewicz pops off too much. He's too snarky. He just makes these snarky comments, and I'm going, you ought to be nicer. If you're the head coach at Missouri, be like Sam Pittman, be a nice guy.
Well, that tweet did make me laugh. I like that one. And you guys hopefully will laugh at this next and final question. T.L. Slayton asks, have you seen the video of last week's midnight yell practice at Texas A&M? Totally embarrassing for the Aggies. School officials need to ban that whole thing. Should we show them the video?
We can't really talk about this unless we show it because this is the first time I've ever seen midnight yell practice. I've always heard about it.
I've seen it too.
The first time we were there a few years ago and we heard it because we were out doing a 10 o'clock live shot. And I think midnight yell practice means it starts around 10:30 and goes to midnight. But we could hear them inside the stadium doing all this stuff, but I've never been inside to see that. Well, this is a rare look at what goes on inside midnight yell practice.
To lie to y'all, I had to Google this team to make sure that they're even real. I was really confused because Appalachia is definitely not a state. But sure enough, I found them, and they're located deep, and I mean deep, in the backwoods. Just like you would think any hillbilly college that names themselves the Mountaineers. I just hope that these guys can get here tomorrow all right, because I know for a fact that half of their football team can barely even read the name on their jerseys, let alone read a map. It's a shame that the only 2 brain cells that all these guys have left are going to get knocked out by our wrecking crew defense tomorrow. Now let's have a Fight Texas Ag yell practice.
That was hard to watch. I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Look,
that was one of the hardest things.
Again, we were talking
I've
about
had to
the whole
watch.
Petrino brace thing. That's a funny way to kind of gig the opponent. What's this? First of all, Appalachian State, they're talking about this all over Twitter. App State apparently has a higher GPA requirement than A&M. And plus, a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, A&M is largely an agricultural school. They turn out farmers.
Right.
You know, so why are their farmers better than the farmers that, you know, in the Appalachian area? You know, come on. So, and then here's the other thing. I mean, I have an uncle that was an Aggie. I've talked about it. He's still an Aggie. You're always an Aggie if you go to school there. And he used to tell me, he said, look, here's what A&M is all about. We're all about, we were raised right. We were raised the good old-fashioned way. We don't act like jerks in public. We're respectful of our elders. We're not bird brains. We're polite, you know. Well, what's this nonsense? What is this garbage? I mean, you're just acting like these guys were a bunch of rubes and they came in and beat you. And here's the funny part too. So App State is such a poor school. They don't have a huge athletic. A&M, they got wads of money. They bought this $30 million signing class. They pay their coach $9 or $10 million a year. Here's poor App State. They come in and the bus that's going to take them back to the airport breaks down.
Oh.
So they have to go back to the hotel and wait. And by the time they get back there, their rooms have been booked by other people, so most of them have to sleep in the hallways and in the lobby and all this stuff. So they spend the night back at the hotel, but not in their rooms. And then they get back the next day and finally get the bus fixed, and they go back to the airport and get on the plane and go home. And then, meanwhile, their fans are wanting them to be back because they want to go bonkers, but they had to wait because that's App State. They don't have a big athletic budget. So it's a great American success story at the expense of the Aggies, and it's just another example of why on this show all the time I will always go after the Aggies because I don't like them.
You have reason after watching that video as well. I just, that was terrible to watch. We'll never get that minute of our life back, Mike.
Now, to me, why don't they just ban, why don't they say, you know, we didn't realize that's what goes on in there. Let's ban it. We don't want our students doing that kind of garbage. We can't officially condone this. If you want to go on your own and do it, but you won't do it inside our stadium. We won't let you do that
They
anymore.
might think so now after that video got out. They might think so now. We'll have to see. We'll have to check in later at a later date and see if they can that for the rest of the season. Well, that's it for Ask Mike this week. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions then.